They didn't just rip her skirt in front of 300 students. They ripped away the last shred of safety she thought she had after surviving a home invasion that nearly killed her. But what those boys didn't know, what nobody at Westridge High knew, was that trauma had forged Ember Novak into something they'd never seen coming. The hallway security footage would later show 23 seconds that changed everything. 23 seconds that exposed a darkness running so deep through that prestigious Denver school. It would bring down a police chief, destroy a dynasty, and give voice to over 100 victims who'd been silenced for years. My name is Patricia Chen, and I was the journalism teacher who watched it all unfold. What I'm about to tell you isn't just another high school drama. It's about how one 17-year-old girl's refusal to be broken started an avalanche that buried the predators hiding in plain sight. It started on a gray November morning when Ember Novak walked into my creative writing class. She was new, transferred from Boulder after family circumstances, her file said. But I'd been teaching long enough to recognize the careful way she positioned herself near exits, how her eyes tracked every movement in the room. This wasn't just a girl adjusting to a new school. This was someone who'd learned that danger could come from anywhere. She chose a seat in the back corner, pulled out a worn notebook, and began writing before I'd even started the lesson. Her long auburn hair fell like a curtain, shielding her from the curious stares of her classmates. In a school where most kids broadcast their lives on social media, Ember Novak was an enigma, wrapped in thrift store clothes and silence. "Class, we have a new student," I announced. Though she'd been there a week already, sometimes acknowledgement helps with integration. "Ember, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?" She looked up, green eyes steady but guarded. "I write, I read, that's about it." A few kids snickered. Not mean-spirited exactly, just the nervous laughter of teenagers faced with someone who wouldn't play the social game. But from the front row, Jackson Reeves turned around, and his smile was different, calculating, like a wolf who'd spotted something interesting. Now, let me tell you about Jackson Reeves. If you'd asked any adult at Westridge High, they'd have told you he was golden, 6'2", quarterback physique, even though he didn't play sports, academically gifted, charming when he wanted to be. His father was Police Chief Martin Reeves, a man who'd run this town's law enforcement for 15 years. His mother had left when he was 10, nobody talked about why, and Chief Reeves had raised his son to be strong, to never show weakness, to take what he wanted. What most people didn't see was how Jackson's charm was a weapon, sharp and selective. How his smile never quite reached his eyes. How girls who rejected him suddenly found themselves isolated, their reputations destroyed by rumors that spread like wildfire through Westridge's halls. I'd had concerns about Jackson for 3 years, ever since Maya Patel had come to me crying about photos she hadn't consented to sharing. But when I'd tried to report it, I'd hit walls. "No evidence," he said. She said. Maya's family moved away 2 months later. "Fire girl," Jackson said, still turned around in his seat, using Ember's last name Novak, meaning new in Czech, but sounding like Nova, like fire. "That's what I'm calling you. Hair like flames." His tone was possessive already, like he'd claimed her. Ember's pen stopped moving. She looked up slowly. "My name is Ember." "I know what your name is." His grin widened. "I make it a point to know about interesting people." As the temperature in the room seemed to drop, I should have intervened right then, but I was trying to gauge if this was harmless flirting or something else. That's the thing about predators, they're experts at operating in the gray areas, making you question your own instincts. "Mr. Reeves," I said, Face forward, please." He turned around lazily, but not before winking at Ember. She didn't react, just returned to her writing. But I saw her knuckles whiten around her pen. After class, I kept Ember back. "Everything okay?" She shouldered her backpack military surplus, I noticed, built for durability, not fashion. "Fine. If anyone gives you trouble, I can handle it." She paused at the door. "But thank you." The way she said it made me think she wasn't used to adults offering help. Or maybe she'd learned that adult help came with conditions, or worse, didn't come at all. The first real incident happened 2 days later in chemistry. I heard about it from Rosario Martinez, a senior who worked as my teaching assistant. Apparently, Jackson had approached Ember at her lab station, leaning in close enough that she had to lean back. "Homecoming's in 2 weeks," he'd said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "You're going with me." Not a question. A statement. "No, thank you," Ember had replied, measuring chemicals for her experiment. The room had gone silent. Nobody rejected Jackson Reeves publicly. Nobody. "I don't think you heard me," he'd said, his voice dropping to that dangerous register his crew knew well. "I said you're going with me." Ember had looked up then, meeting his eyes. "I heard you. The answer is no. You're new here, so I'll give you another chance." The answer will still be no. She'd turned back to her experiment. "Excuse me, I need to focus on this." According to Rosario, Jackson's face had flushed dark red. He'd started to say something else, but Mrs. Peterson had intervened, sending him back to his station for the rest of the period. He'd stared at Ember with an expression that made Rosario text me immediately. The new girl just painted a target on her back. What happened next followed a pattern I'd seen before, but never this intense. Ember's locker was vandalized "stuck-up bitch" in red marker. Her textbooks disappeared from her backpack during gym. Someone spread a rumor that she'd transferred schools after being caught with a teacher. Each incident was deniable. Each one happened where cameras mysteriously malfunctioned or didn't exist. Chief Reeves had made sure his son knew every blind spot in that school. But Ember didn't crumble. She replaced her books, cleaned her locker, ignored the whispers. She kept to herself, ate lunch in the library, arrived exactly when classes started, and left immediately after. A ghost who refused to be haunted. This seemed to infuriate Jackson more. He was used to breaking people, especially girls who thought they were too good for him. His crew, Blake Morrison and Hunter Collins, started following Ember between classes, making comments just loud enough for her to hear. "Heard she's frigid." "Nah, probably just racist. Doesn't date white guys." "Maybe she's into girls. That why you're hiding in the library." "Fire girl." Have you ever watched someone being slowly cornered and felt that sick helplessness, that rage at systems that protect the powerful while abandoning the vulnerable? That's what those weeks felt like. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday. I'd stayed late grading papers, one of the last cars in the faculty lot. As I walked to my car, I heard voices from around the corner of the building. Laughing. Male. Cruel in that particular way that makes your skin crawl. "Dude, she's not even that hot close up." "Butt face for sure. But check out the V." I recognized Jackson's voice and peered around the corner. He was huddled with Blake and Hunter around a laptop, its screen casting blue light on their faces. They were too absorbed to notice me. "How many you got now?" Hunter asked. 47 in the main folder, Jackson said. Another 30 in the reserves. Sarah Chen's is gold, Blake laughed. Her parents would lose their minds. My blood ran cold. Sarah Chen was a sophomore, a straight-A student, sweet kid who played violin in the orchestra. That's the beauty of it, Jackson said. They pay to keep them out of circulation. 500 initial, 100 a month after, like a subscription service. Your dad know. My dad taught me everything I know about leverage. Jackson's grin was visible even in profile. How you think he's run this town so long? I must have made a sound because suddenly Hunter's head snapped up. I ducked back, heart hammering, and speed-walked to my car. As I drove away, I saw a figure in my rearview mirror, Jackson, watching me leave. The next morning, Principal Davidson called me into his office. "Patricia, I've had a concerning report about you." "About me? Apparently you were loitering in the parking lot after hours, possibly intoxicated. I know you've been under stress with the divorce." I hadn't told anyone at school about my divorce. The threat was clear: stay quiet, or your personal life becomes public fodder. But that's when I made my first mistake. Instead of going straight to the authorities outside the school, I tried to warn Ember privately. I caught her after class and asked her to be careful, that Jackson was more dangerous than he seemed. She studied me for a long moment. "I know what he is," she said quietly. "I've met his type before." "It's worse than you think. He has—" I stopped, realizing I couldn't tell her about the videos without potentially making her a target. "He has leverage on people," she finished. "Videos, pictures, I know." I stared at her. "How—" A shadow crossed her face. "Because last night I saw him reviewing his collection on his laptop in the library. He didn't know I was in the biography section." She paused. "And I recognized one of the girls." "Who?" "My chemistry partner, Rosario Martinez." My heart sank. Bright, confident Rosario who wanted to be a doctor, who came from a traditional Catholic family that would implode if compromising photos surfaced. "We have to report this," I said. "To who his father runs the police. The principal is clearly in their pocket. The school board—" She shook her head. "You know what happens to girls who report things like this? They become the story. Their lives get dissected while the boys get stern talks about poor judgment." She was right, and we both knew it. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed to protect those in power. "So what do we do?" I asked. Ember's green eyes hardened. "We wait, and we watch. And when he makes a mistake, because boys like him always do, we make sure everyone sees it." What I didn't know then was that Ember Novak had already survived something that would have broken most people. The family circumstances that led to her transfer A home invasion 6 months earlier. 3 men had broken into their Boulder home while her parents were at a school function. Ember had been alone, studying in her room. I only learned the details later. From the therapy notes her parents shared during the trial. How she'd hidden in a closet for 43 minutes while the men ransacked the house. How one had nearly found her. How she'd held a field hockey stick like her life depended on it. Barely breathing. Certain she was about to die. The men were never caught. The Novaks moved to Denver, hoping a fresh start would help their daughter heal. They enrolled her in Krav Maga classes at her therapist's suggestion, something to help her feel less helpless, to channel the hypervigilance that kept her awake at night. 6 months of training, 6 months of learning to turn fear into fuel, to strike first and fast when cornered. Her instructor, Mr. Kozlov, was a former Israeli Special Forces soldier who ran a small gym downtown. He'd recognized the look in her eyes, the constant assessment of threats, the careful positioning, the readiness to fight or flee. "Fear is not enemy," he'd told her in his thick accent. "Fear is radar. Listen to it. But when time comes to act, fear becomes power. You understand?" She'd understood, and she'd trained like her life depended on it. Because, in her mind, it did. But Jackson Reeves didn't know any of this. He only knew that Ember Novak had rejected him, publicly, and that couldn't stand. The harassment escalated. Dead roses left on her desk. Her car tires deflated. A photo of her house posted on an anonymous Instagram account with the caption, "Fire Girl's Nest. Wonder if it burns." That last one made her parents consider pulling her out of school. I know because her mother, Linda, called me in tears. She's been through so much already. We just wanted her to have a normal senior year. I wanted to tell Linda everything about the videos, the blackmail ring, the corruption that ran from the school halls to the police station. But I couldn't prove any of it. And I was terrified of making things worse for Ember. "She's stronger than you think," I told Linda instead. "And she's not alone. I'm watching out for her." It was a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in late November. The weather had turned bitter, students bundled in heavy coats and scarves. Ember had started varying her routes through the building, never taking the same path twice. But Jackson had been watching, learning her patterns. I wasn't there when it happened, but I've watched the security footage so many times I can see it when I close my eyes. Though, of course, the crucial camera, the one that would have captured everything, clearly had mysteriously malfunctioned that day. 3:27 p.m., the West Hallway, usually crowded, but that day strangely empty. Later, we'd learned Jackson had pulled a fire alarm in the East Building, drawing students and staff away. He'd planned this. Ember walked out of the bathroom, adjusting her backpack. She wore a knee-length denim skirt, modest by any standard, and a black sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, revealing the pale column of her neck. They came from 3 directions: Jackson from the front, Blake and Hunter from the sides, classic ambush formation. Ember saw them and tried to backtrack, but the bathroom door had already swung shut and locked behind her. "Going somewhere, Fire Girl?" Jackson asked, his voice carrying that false friendliness that preceded violence. "I have class," Ember said evenly, though the footage shows her shifting her weight, preparing. "No, you have a lesson to learn." He pulled something from his pocket, a knife, not a weapon meant to kill, but to humiliate. "See, I've been patient. I've given you chances. But you think you're better than everyone here." "I think I have the right to say no," Ember replied. "Rights," Jackson laughed, and his crew joined in. "You know what I think? I think you're hiding something under all those proper clothes. Time to see what Fire Girl's really made of." Let me pause here to tell you something about trauma responses. Most people know about fight or flight, but there's also freeze and fawn. Ember had frozen once before, in that closet in Boulder. She'd promised herself never again. So when Jackson moved toward her with the knife, when Blake and Hunter grabbed her arms, something else took over. Not Ember, the scared teenager, but Ember, the survivor, who'd spent 6 months turning her body into a weapon. The security footage, grainy as it is, shows what happened next in brutal clarity. as Jackson brought the knife toward her skirt. Ember dropped her weight and twisted. Blake lost his grip. Her elbow came up hard into his solar plexus, doubling him over. Hunter tried to maintain his hold, but she stomped his instep and drove her head back into his nose. 2.5 seconds. 2 attackers down. Jackson lunged with the knife, whether to complete his humiliation or now to actually hurt her. We'll never know, because Ember had already pivoted, using Hunter's released arm to generate momentum. Her leg came up in a perfect arc, a spinning heel kick Mr. Kozlov would later describe as textbook but with feeling. Her boot connected with Jackson's face, with a sound the nearby camera's audio picked up clearly. A wet crunch that meant broken bones. 3.8 seconds. 3 attackers on the ground. But here's the part that haunts me. The part that shows just how broken these boys were. As Jackson fell, his phone tumbled from his pocket. The screen lit up, showing a folder labeled Prospects inside, visible for just a moment before the phone skittered away. Were dozens of photos, creep shots of girls throughout the school, including one of Ember, taken from behind as she climbed stairs. She stood there for a moment, breathing hard, her skirt intact, but her whole body trembling with adrenaline. Then, very deliberately, she stepped over Jackson's groaning form and picked up his phone. "No," he gasped through the blood streaming from his nose. "You don't! My dad will. Your dad will what?" Ember's voice was steady now, cold. "Destroy me, like you've destroyed all these girls." That's when other students began arriving, drawn by the sound of the fight. They found Ember standing over 3 of the most feared boys in school, holding evidence of crimes that would rock the entire community. "Someone call 911, she said calmly. "And someone else start recording. Make sure you get their faces. Make sure you get everything." By the time I arrived, running from my classroom 3 buildings over, the hallway was packed. Students had their phones out, documenting everything. The 3 boys were still on the ground, Blake gasping for air, Hunter trying to stem the flow of blood from his nose, and Jackson barely conscious, his perfect face a ruin of blood and rapidly swelling tissue. Ember stood apart from the crowd, her back against the wall. When she saw me, something in her face cracked. "Ms. Chen," she said, and for the first time, she sounded like the teenager she was. "I didn't mean to. They were going to—" "I know," I said, pushing through the crowd to reach her. "I know, honey, you're safe now." But even as I said it, I knew the real fight was just beginning. Because, in the distance, we could already hear the sirens, and Chief Martin Reeves was about to find out his son had been taken down by the girl he'd tried to break. The videos of the aftermath went viral within hours. Not Ember's fight, she'd refused to let anyone post that, saying she wouldn't profit from violence even in self-defense. But the videos of Jackson's crew being loaded into ambulances, of Chief Reeves arriving at the school with his face purple with rage, of him trying to confiscate phones and being surrounded by students chanting, "Film the police." The real explosion came that night when a mysterious account dumped the contents of Jackson's phone online. Hundreds of photos, dozens of videos, a spreadsheet tracking payments from victims, names, dates, amounts. 3 years of evidence that Jackson Reeves had been running a blackmail ring with his father's tacit approval and protection. The account name, Valkyrie Protocol. Nobody ever proved it was Ember, though the FBI Cyber Crimes Unit tried. She'd been too careful, too smart. Or maybe she'd had help from someone else who'd been waiting for the right moment to bring down the Reeves dynasty. Have you ever seen a community reckon with its complicity in real time? That's what happened over the next 48 hours. Parents who'd dismissed their daughters' concerns suddenly believed them. Teachers who'd looked the other way couldn't anymore. The school board members who'd taken campaign donations from Chief Reeves scrambled to distance themselves. And the victims began to speak. First 1, then 5, then 20, then 50. Girls who'd been photographed without consent. Boys who'd been bullied into silence. Parents who'd paid to protect their children's futures. A cancer of exploitation that had metastasized through the entire school system. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because first, they tried to destroy Ember. That night, as the story exploded across social media, Chief Reeves held a press conference. He stood at the podium in full uniform, every inch the respected lawman, and painted a different picture entirely. My son was viciously attacked today by a troubled young woman with a history of violence, he said, his voice grave. We've learned that Miss Novak has been in therapy for violent tendencies following an incident at her previous school. Today, she lured my son and his friends into an ambush. Lies wrapped in just enough truth to sound plausible. Yes, Ember was in therapy for PTSD. Yes, there had been an incident at her previous school. She'd been the victim. But context didn't matter when you controlled the narrative. Within hours, Ember's family was under siege, reporters on their lawn, death threats in their inbox. Their address posted on forums with calls for justice. Linda Novak called me sobbing at 2 a.m. They're trying to make her the villain, she cried. After everything she's been through, how is this happening? But Chief Reeves had underestimated the power of truth in the digital age. The students who'd witnessed the attack began posting their accounts. Security footage from other angles surfaced, showing Jackson's crew stalking Ember. A brave soul leaked audio from a school board meeting months earlier where concerns about Jackson had been dismissed. And then Colton Hayes did something extraordinary. Colton was Blake Morrison's younger brother, a sophomore who'd lived in the shadow of his brother's cruelty. At 3 a.m., he went live on Instagram from his bedroom, his face pale but determined. I can't stay quiet anymore, he said to his phone camera. My brother Blake and his friends, they're monsters, and I have proof. For the next 30 minutes, Colton laid out everything. How Jackson had blackmailed his sister the previous year, how Blake had helped cover it up, how their parents knew but were too afraid of Chief Reeves to act. He showed screenshots, played audio recordings, named names. They tried to destroy Ember Novak because she stood up to them, he said, tears streaming down his face. Just like they destroyed my sister. Just like they destroyed so many others. But Ember fought back. And now I'm fighting back too. The live stream had 50,000 viewers before his parents burst in and made him stop. But it was too late. The truth was out, spreading faster than anyone could contain it. By dawn, Chief Reeves's press conference video had been dissected, fact-checked, and revealed as a tapestry of lies. The FBI announced they were opening an investigation. The state attorney general promised a full review of the police department, and one by one, Jackson's victims began to feel something they hadn't in years. Hope. The morning after Colton Hayes' live stream, I arrived at school to find something I'd never seen before: solidarity. Students wore denim skirts and black sweaters in support of Ember. Someone had painted Valkyrie Protocol across the senior parking lot in chalk. The hallway where the attack happened had become a memorial wall, covered with sticky notes bearing messages of support and shared stories. She fought for all of us. One note read, 23 seconds of courage changed everything, said another. But Ember wasn't there to see it. Her parents had kept her home, terrified of retaliation. Chief Reeves might have been under investigation, but he still had loyalists. Threats had been spray-painted on their garage door, a brick through their living room window. I called Linda Novak that afternoon. "How is she?" "Quiet," Linda said. "She keeps apologizing for bringing this trouble to our door, as if any of this is her fault." "Can I speak with her?" There was a pause, muffled conversation. Then Ember's voice came on the line. "Ms. Chen." "How are you holding up, honey?" A long silence. Then, "I didn't want to hurt them, I just wanted them to stop." "I know. Everyone knows that now." "Do they?" Her voice cracked. "Because half the internet thinks I'm some kind of violent vigilante. They're calling me unstable, dangerous. Everything Chief Reeves said." This is the part of the story people don't talk about enough. How fighting back comes with a cost. How victims get re-victimized by systems designed to protect perpetrators. How being brave doesn't mean you don't suffer. "Ember," I said, "do you know what my grandmother used to tell me? She survived the Cultural Revolution in China. She said, 'The loudest voices aren't always the majority. They're just the most afraid.' Chief Reeves is loud because he's terrified. Because you did what dozens of adults couldn't do. You stood up." I was just defending myself. "No," I said firmly. "You were defending every girl whose photo is in that phone. Every victim who paid to keep their dignity. Every student who'll walk those halls safer because of what you did. That's not violence, Ember. That's justice." 3 days later, the FBI raid on the Reeves home made national news. Agents carried out boxes of evidence, computers, files dating back years. Neighbors watched as Chief Martin Reeves was led away in handcuffs, his career and reputation in ruins. The investigation revealed a web of corruption that went beyond even what we'd feared. Chief Reeves hadn't just protected his son, he'd been taking a cut of the blackmail money. He'd used his position to bury complaints, intimidate witnesses, and destroy evidence. The apple hadn't fallen far from the tree. It had been carefully cultivated. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Jackson's mother. Patricia Reeves had left when Jackson was 10, according to the official story. The truth, revealed in divorce documents she provided to investigators, was darker. She'd fled after Martin's controlling behavior escalated to violence. She'd tried to take Jackson, but Martin had used his law enforcement connections to paint her as unstable, unfit. She'd spent 8 years fighting for visitation rights he'd systematically denied. "I watched my son become his father," she told reporters outside the courthouse, tears streaming down her face. "I tried to warn people. No one would listen. It took a 17-year-old girl to do what an entire system refused to do, stand up to Martin Reeves." The trials began in January. Jackson, despite his injuries, was charged as an adult assault, blackmail, distribution of intimate images without consent. His broken nose and fractured orbital bone had healed crooked, leaving his once perfect face asymmetrical. Poetic justice, some said, though I took no pleasure in it. He was still a broken boy who'd chosen to break others instead of healing himself. Blake Morrison and Hunter Collins pled guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testimony. Watching them on the stand, describing the systematic way they'd hunted and humiliated their classmates, was sickening, but also necessary. Every word they spoke validated victims who had been gaslit into silence. Ember testified on the third day. She walked into that courtroom with her head high, wearing the same type of outfit she'd worn during the attack: denim skirt, black sweater, a statement without words. "I'm not proud of hurting anyone," she said when asked about the incident. "But I'm not ashamed of defending myself. For 6 months after my home was invaded, I felt powerless, terrified. I promised myself I'd never be a victim again. When they came for me, I kept that promise." The prosecutor asked her about the Valkyrie Protocol username. "I don't know anything about that," Ember said calmly. And legally, no one could prove otherwise. The account had been created from a coffee shop Wi-Fi, paid for with cryptocurrency, and deleted after the data dump. Whoever ran it, and I have my suspicions, had been very, very careful. But the name itself became a rallying cry. The Valkyrie Protocol evolved from a hashtag to a movement. Support groups formed in schools across the country. Self-defense classes specifically for teens saw enrollment skyrocket. A generation of young people decided they wouldn't be easy prey anymore. Jackson Reeves was sentenced to 7 years in prison. His father got 15. The school district paid out millions in settlements to victims. Principal Davidson resigned in disgrace when his complicity came to light. A third of the school board was replaced. But justice isn't just about punishment. It's about healing. And that's where this story takes its most powerful turn. In March, Ember returned to Westridge High. I'll never forget that morning. The student body had organized a welcome-back assembly without telling the administration. As Ember walked through the front doors, hundreds of students lined the hallways, applauding, not cheering or yelling, just steady, respectful applause that followed her all the way to her locker. She stopped, overwhelmed, and that's when Rosario Martinez stepped forward. Beautiful, brilliant Rosario, who had been one of Jackson's victims. "Thank you," Rosario said simply, and hugged her. One by one, other victims came forward. Not all, some preferred their privacy, and that was respected. But dozens of girls, and several boys who'd suffered under the Reeves' reign of terror, approached Ember that day. Some hugged her, some just nodded, some cried, and Ember, who had been so isolated, so alone in her struggle, finally understood something she'd never been fighting just for herself. That afternoon, she came to my classroom with a proposal. "I want to start something," she said. "Not a club, not an organization, something more." "What did you have in mind?" She pulled out a folder organized, thorough, clearly something she'd been working on for weeks. The Valkyrie Protocol. For real this time. A network of students trained not just in self-defense, but in recognizing predatory behavior, supporting victims, documenting evidence safely. Not vigilantes, guardians. I looked through her proposal-detailed plans for training sessions. Partnership with local law enforcement, the cleaned-up version. Cooperation with counselors and legal advocates. She'd thought of everything. "Mr. Kozlov has agreed to provide free training," she continued. "My mom, she's a grant writer. She thinks we can get funding. Make it available to any student who wants it. No questions asked." "This is ambitious," I said. "So was surviving," she replied. "But I did that too." By May, the Valkyrie Protocol had chapters in 6 schools. By graduation, it was in 20. Ember Novak, the girl who had eaten lunch alone in the library, walked across that stage to thunderous applause. She'd been accepted to Colorado State University, planning to study criminal justice and psychology. She wanted to be the advocate she'd needed. In her graduation speech, yes. They asked her to speak. She said something I'll never forget. They tell us violence is never the answer, but they forget to tell us what to do when violence is the question being asked of us, when someone tries to strip away your dignity, your safety, your right to exist peacefully in this world. You have the right to answer back, not with cruelty, but with strength, not with revenge, but with justice, and never, ever with silence. A Chief Reeves, watching from his federal prison cell, would later claim in appeals that his son had been corrupted by violent feminist ideology. But the truth was simpler and sadder. Jackson Reeves had been corrupted by his father's example, by power without accountability, by a system that taught him women were objects to control rather than people to respect. That system didn't die overnight. It still hasn't, not completely. But it took a massive blow the day Ember Novak refused to be another victim. As I write this, 5 years later. The Valkyrie Protocol operates in over 200 schools nationwide. Ember works as a victim's advocate while completing her master's degree. She still trains in Krav Maga, now as an instructor herself, teaching other survivors to transform trauma into strength. Jackson Reeves was released after serving 5 years. He lives quietly in another state, working construction, reportedly in therapy. I hope he's learning to be better. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption, even those who've done terrible things. But redemption requires acknowledgement, accountability, and genuine change, things his father never taught him. Martin Reeves will be in prison until at least 2032. The last I heard, his ex-wife, Patricia, had become an advocate for domestic violence survivors, speaking about how abusers use systems of power to trap their victims. Mother and son finally reunited, both broken by Martin's cruelty, but finding ways to heal. And Westridge High. It's different now. Not perfect, no place is, but safer. Students know they have recourse. Predators know there are consequences. And everyone knows the story of the girl who fought back and won. Sometimes I get messages from former students who went through something similar. They tell me how remembering Ember's story gave them courage, how knowing someone else survived helped them survive too, how the Valkyrie Protocol was there when they needed it. That's the thing about courage, it's contagious. One person stands up, and others remember they can stand too. One voice breaks the silence, and the chorus follows. One girl refuses to be broken, and a whole system built on breaking people starts to crumble. If you've stayed with me this long, maybe you recognize something in this story. Maybe you were Ember once, or knew someone who was. Maybe you were silent when you could have spoken, or spoke when no one listened. Maybe you're wondering what you would have done in that hallway, faced with 3 attackers and a knife. Here's what I've learned: we all have a choice, every day, to either perpetuate systems of harm or stand against them. It doesn't always take 23 seconds of physical courage. Sometimes it's believing a victim. Sometimes it's questioning authority. Sometimes it's just refusing to look away. Ember Novak taught me that broken things can be reforged into something stronger. That trauma doesn't have to be the end of your story. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to break. Why, indeed? The Valkyrie Protocol isn't just about self-defense. It's about community defense. It's about creating a world where predators can't operate in shadows because we've flooded every corner with light. What will you do with your 23 seconds when they come, because they will come? For all of us, in different ways. That moment arrives when we must choose comply or resist, silence or speech, fear or fury. Choose wisely, choose bravely, choose like Ember. The fire is catching, and I hope it burns down every system that protects predators at the expense of their prey. Thank you for listening to this story. Share it if it moved you. Not for likes or views, but because someone out there needs to hear it. Someone is sitting alone, afraid, wondering if they'll ever be safe again. Tell them about the girl who was afraid too. Tell them what she did with her fear. Tell them about Ember Novak and the 23 seconds that started a revolution. Tell them the fire is spreading. And tell them they don't have to burn alone. Last week, I received an invitation in the mail, thick cream paper, elegant script, the 5th annual Valkyrie Protocol Gala. My hands trembled as I read the handwritten note at the bottom. Ms. Chen, none of this would exist without you believing me when no one else would. Please come. E. The gala was held in the Denver Convention Center. I walked in to find hundreds of people, survivors, advocates, parents, teachers, law enforcement officers who actually protect and serve. On the walls, photographs and stories of those who'd found strength through the protocol. Ember found me in the crowd, 22 now, poised and powerful, but still with that watchful awareness of someone who'd learned hard lessons young. She wasn't alone. Mr. Kozlov stood beside her, gray-haired now, but still radiating that quiet strength. Rosario Martinez was there too, fresh from her first year of medical school. Ms. Chen, Ember said, and hugged me tight. Thank you for coming. Thank you for not giving up, I replied. She pulled back, eyes bright with unshed tears. I have something to show you. She led me to a wall I hadn't noticed covered in letters. Hundreds of them. Thank you notes from students across the country. Stories of attacks prevented. Predators exposed. Victims believed. Lives saved. Every single one of these exists because you taught me that my voice mattered, Ember said. Because when I was 17 and terrified, you saw me, really saw me. I stood there, overwhelmed, reading message after message. Kids who'd found courage. Teachers who'd found purpose. Communities that had chosen change over comfortable complicity. We all have our 23 seconds, Ember said softly. Yours was choosing to warn me that day, even when it put your job at risk. That's when this really started. She was wrong. Of course. It started the day she walked into my classroom, carrying trauma, but refusing to let it carry her. But maybe that's the real lesson. We never know which small act of courage will spark a revolution. We just have to act anyway.